Howdy guys and gals, I'm Kyle Broderick. Welcome to the Social Regressive. You've probably seen a couple of the recent videos where I have been testing out night vision gear, doing some hunting especially after dark, and that has been just a whole lot of fun. I also did some camo tests. This has been a little bit different for me. I usually wake up really early in the morning in order to shoot these videos for you guys, and instead I've been staying out really late at night, so that might be why there's a little bit of a slowdown in video release. I did have a really good time with some buddies going out hunting, and it all worked out really well, and I'm going to be able to roll in a little bit of footage as we talk about the gear that we used. And the one that I'm going to center on today, this is the Night Optics Sentry 14. A lot of you are already familiar with the PVS 14 that the military uses, and that's going to be a Gen 3, I believe, monocular. And for those of you that aren't familiar with some of the military hardware, if you watch a movie that has some operators going out doing operaty things, they're going to have one or two of these hanging from their helmets. These are the ones that are going to be just kind of sticking out in front, and these are 1X monoculars. And this particular one, this Night Optics Sentry 14, it takes that same package, it takes the same sort of controls, takes the same kind of build, the same uses, and this is its own kind of special thing. You can kind of change out what's in here, and Night Optics came up with a really sweet little formula. This is using what's called the Brilliance 3 intensifier. Some of you may know that these go in generations. There's a Generation 1, which is like the old Starlight scopes, and back in Vietnam, and actually before that, and then eventually we start stepping up into Gen 2, Gen 3, and kind of the current is the Gen 3 or Gen 3 Plus. One of them gets you a little bit more longevity. One of them gets you a bit more intensification, so you can get a bit of a prettier image. And this right here is something a little bit different. This appears to be a proprietary intensifier called the Brilliance 3. I haven't heard of this before. This seems to be just a Night Optics thing. And it works out really, really well. It seems to get you, it seems like almost a Gen 3 image. It's definitely very bright. You don't need any kind of active illumination like you get from an illuminator like this one. This is an Evolva, and I'm going to talk about this here in a second. But for a lot of the older generation Night Optics, you had to use some kind of illuminator to throw some infrared light at a target. You get the bounce back and you can see, but with this, you really can work by starlight, and we proved that in some of our own shooting. So yeah, this right here, I have a little cheat sheet right here to help me with some of the specs. Like I said, this is a 1X. It has a 26mm objective lens, and that's an f1.2 for you guys that are optics nerds. That's a pretty darn wide open lens. That's going to suck in a whole lot of light. So that's a good start to begin with. Also out on this end, and I'm going to go ahead and take the lens cap off. Since we are indoors, you don't want to take this thing out during daylight. You could actually damage the delicate instruments inside here by taking it out. But yeah, you can see the lens right here, and it has a demist filter on the outside here to kind of, I think, prevent fog from building up. As you might expect, there is no reticle inside here. This is just a monocular, but you can actually get a kit that will mount this to the top of a rifle, and then you can put in front of it some kind of NV-compatible red dot sight, like an EOTech or an Aimpoint. There are a bunch out there that are NV-compatible. I tried a Bushnell TRS-25, and even on its lowest setting, it was still way too bright. It was totally blowing out the image. But yeah, make sure that you have an NV-compatible one, and you should be able to use this to just kind of take off your helmet, off your tripod, however you're using it, put it on the rifle, and then you can use it to actually do some hunting or shooting after dark. So some of the other specs on here, the warranty is for 2 years. The operating temperature is anywhere from a negative 60 degrees Fahrenheit up to 125 degrees Fahrenheit, which is pretty impressive. A lot of these things tend to fail. You might want to make sure that the battery that you use is one that can handle temperatures that low as well. And actually, this is a really good time to point this out. This is not some kind of exotic battery that this uses. You won't believe this. It looks like it's for a CR123, which is what you typically are going to expect from some kind of sight like this, an electronic one, this takes double A's. And it doesn't just take double A's. It lasts a really, really long time on one double A. And this is one of the things that I just love about this. Anytime I get some kind of electronics, one of the big things that I'm thinking about is what kind of battery does it use? First off, is it a battery that I can easily recharge? Or is it one that I can buy off the shelf if I need to go out and find one? If I'm on a hunt and a battery dies, can I go run down to the convenience store or something and get something to replace it, or something that I just kind of keep in my bag at all times? So yeah, this is actually using the original battery that shipped with the unit. This came, in the device, in the box, and so far it is still running. After all the 8 times that I've gone out with this to hunt, and a couple other little trips just to get some extra footage, like testing camouflage, it's still running. And check this out. The battery, one double A lasts for 40 hours, as long as it's a good double A. In this one, I have that Rayovac that originally came with it. This one I accidentally switched on and left in the box for a little while, so it died on me. But I put in a couple of Panasonic Eneloop rechargeable nickel metal hydride batteries, and yeah, that one's still good to go. It's running just great. I love the fact that you can have just a simple off-the-shelf battery and you get a ton of life out of this. I was expecting this to really suck up a lot of juice, and it does not. So some of the accessories that come with this, first off, you get this nice little hard case right here, and it looks kind of simple, but actually it's not. It does have a gasket running around the lid right here. So in addition to this device itself being waterproof, actually down to 60 feet, if you want to keep rain off it and maybe help the unit float if you accidentally drop it off a boat or something, yeah, this is actually a waterproof case as well. It's quite rigid. This is not like your typical cheap pistol case that you get. This is very thick. It seems to be made by a very good vendor. And then you have kind of the pick-free foam down here, so that you can just drop this in and it should be very secure. This also comes with, well, they included a fun little sticker. I was kind of hoping this would be night vision compatible, and it would bounce things back. It's just a white sticker you can slap on your car. But also comes with a full manual to tell you all the things you should not do, like taking the lens cover off in the sun, and just how the various controls work. And this is one where you do have to be kind of careful about learning the controls before you actually go out, because these are a little bit fiddly. If you go out and try to mess with this at night without having tested it out beforehand, I think you're gonna have a difficult time. So we're gonna take a close look at the controls on here. They're, like I said, they're pretty simple, but they're robust and they work really well. Before we get down to checking out the controls, let's take a look at the overall construction. Most of this appears to be made of some kind of reinforced polymer. I'm not sure what exactly is reinforcing it or what the polymer is, but it looks like some stuff that I've used on some other products, and it's typically very tough and also very light. And in this case, yeah, the whole unit, even with all the electronics, the battery installed, this comes out to be 13 ounces, which is, if it were a day scope, it would be very light. That would be on the very light side. Now, moving around to the front, we have the lens cap over the lens that should be protected from very bright lights. I'm just here in the studio. These are not actually all that bright, so we're okay. But we don't ever want to expose this to daylight, arc welding, that sort of thing. But this right here, it absorbs lots of light, and if you want to back it off for viewing during the day, this cap actually has a pinhole straight through it. So you can just keep this attached, turn on your unit, and then all the daylight should be fine. Just don't ever point it directly at the sun, of course. The objective can be adjusted right here, so you can focus on objects that are really close, like within a foot, out to infinity. And folks that are especially in the law enforcement end of things, they're going to have to pick one when they go into a situation. Like, say, if they need to go into a house, they're probably just going to have to pick a good focal distance and leave it there. It's not going to automatically adjust. This is manual. Other adjustments on the front here, this is the gain. This is how you select how sensitive the sensor is going to be when you start using it. So yeah, you can dial this back if you're getting just a little bit too much splash from something like the illuminator right here. And if it's just too bright in your view, you can crank it up. Now remember, as you do increase the gain, you also increase noise, which is again a good reason to use the illuminator. And you can see that it has a little illuminator built right into the face. There's a little infrared light bulb, kind of like the bulb that you get on your remote control for your TV. And all of that is controlled here on the back. This is where you cycle through the various modes that this has. So we have the offsetting, which we're set on right now. There's on, which should be showing some green. Yeah, there we go. And then there's one more mode, which is IR. You can momentarily turn on that front bulb just by twisting it a little bit. Or if you pull the stem out, and then pull it all the way over, that will leave on that infrared bulb so you get some illumination. You might think that little bulb doesn't do very much, but it actually does. It's good enough for navigating inside a house, for seeing all kinds of detail inside a house, and in a backyard too. You can probably get out to about 25 yards or so, and that's about the usable distance, I think, for that bulb. I could be wrong, but that's kind of how it seemed to me. For anything further than that, we definitely wanted to use a real big illuminator like this one. Continuing our exploration of the back end of the unit, we have the diopter adjustment. So if you need glasses, if you're a little bit nearsighted, farsighted, whatever, and you need to adjust, that's it right there. You just turn this ring. And then this is the rubber eyepiece that comes with it. This comes attached, and you can actually just unscrew this if you want to be able to put on an adapter for a camera or anything like that. The rubber eyepiece is very important. It's going to keep stray light from getting in on the sides so that it doesn't disrupt your image. And more importantly, perhaps for those that might have someone with night vision looking back at them, it's going to help seal up that eye cup, and it's going to keep the light that's coming out of this little, the intensifier in here, it's going to keep that from spilling out and showing off your location. And when it comes to that, just remember that passive IR is a great way to go if you think that there might be somebody that's scoping you out with some kind of night vision device. So yeah, you might want to keep that light off or not use a rangefinder or an illuminator. But then when it comes to hunting, yeah, this is exactly the sort of stuff we want. Moving back around to the front, you'll see this little dial right next to the battery compartment. And this lets you adjust gain. Just like any video camera system, if you crank this up, crank this down, it's going to change the sensitivity and how much boost the electronics are putting behind. They're kind of adding a little extra signal to the chip in order to read more information. So what this does, just like with video, if you crank it down, you're going to decrease your exposure. If you crank it up, it will increase it, but it will also increase gain, which is going to give you some kind of snow in the image. So eventually, if you crank this all the way up, the image might kind of become unusable. It depends on what kind of illumination you have. And then again, if you have an external illuminator, you might actually need to be dropping that gain so that you can get a decent view through this unit. And this actually has a built-in automatic gate, which is really handy. If suddenly the lighting conditions change, like say you get headlights in the face, someone switches on a spotlight, someone comes into a room and flips the light on, this is automatically going to adjust. It's going to cut it right down to a visible image. Let's talk about practical application with the Century 14 and how it worked out for us in our hunts and some of the other tests that we did. First off, the image just overall it's just beautiful. You would be just amazed. The first time that I used this, I just kind of turned it on in the house and I was looking around and I was like, man, this image looks like garbage. It's just sparking all over the place. It looks like the gain is really high. The grain is terrible. And that's when I realized that even though it was totally dark in the house, I was seeing everything with the lens cap still on. This has a tiny little hole through it, like I mentioned, for being able to see things during the day if you need to, or other bright lights. But then I took this off and suddenly I could see the entire world in just vivid detail. This can see blades of grass. This can see leaves hanging from trees. This can see all kinds of details as long as you roll that objective lens to the right focus. And it is good to some pretty remarkable distances. We used this as a spotting scope when we were hunting. We had this mounted to a tripod. We had a camera mounted behind it using this little accessory right here. This is another Night Optics product. This allows you to slap on a smartphone, and then you can just use the smartphone, kind of look at that, and that becomes your spotting scope. They have a couple other adapters too if you want to be able to hook up a DSLR or some other kind of camera. And I did kind of jury rig something so that we could have a camcorder behind it so that we could get footage that way as well. Tried both. Both of them worked really well. If you have good battery life on your cell phone, that's going to work out great. But yeah, we used this as our spotting scope and it worked out really, really well, especially in concert with that illuminator. With this, as long as we had the illuminator pretty much on axis, pretty close, we were able to get really good retinal bounces off game out there. So we were able to pretty well determine, okay, there is an animal out there, let's get a closer look at it. And then in general, we would go back and look through it with the magnified optic in order to see exactly what it was. So with this one, we could see that there was an animal, and with that, we could see what the animal actually was. And in some cases, it turned out to be deer. We were getting ready to, take a shot, lining up on something, and then we see the big old ears. So yeah, if you have one of these, I do recommend that you pick up an illuminator because it is going to really stretch out the distances. Like I showed, there is an infrared bulb built into this, but it's really designed for kind of closer use. Within 50 yards, I think you're going to get some kind of bounce back, and especially, off the retinas again, you're going to be able to see some things. But if you want to stretch out to, in our case, I think probably about 200 yards, use these two together and you can see a lot. The total experience was exhilarating. This is a totally unique way to hunt. I've been out shooting prairie dogs for a long time. I've been doing some hog hunting. You can see some of the videos here. I'll put them in a link somewhere around here. But this was totally unique. To be able to go out when it's dark out, all you have is starlight or maybe whatever bounce is coming off the clouds, and to be able to see game wandering around out in the field, and then to be able to make those shots, make connections, and be able to find them later. That was totally unique. If you want to, just go with a guide company or something, you got to go try it sometime because it really was a whole lot of fun. Thank you to Night Optics for sending these out for me to play with, and thanks a bunch to the patrons of the Destructive Arts that make these videos possible. If anybody else wants to get involved, kick in $1 a month to keep the project going, keep the lights on, I'll put a link around here somewhere. Thanks especially to the 300 Win Mag patron of the Destructive Arts, Peter. And we have a whole bunch more interesting stuff coming up. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you hit the notification bell, because we have all kinds of neat tests coming up, new rifle builds, and then we have some of the reviews of other products like these calls that we used in order to do the hunt. I'll see you guys around. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to like, share, and most importantly, subscribe. Even if you didn't like this particular content, go ahead and subscribe. There's probably something coming that's more up your alley. Check out this playlist right here. This is going to have videos in a similar vein to what you just watched. These two videos we cherry-picked for you. And finally, The Social Regressive is on Patreon. So you can become a patron of the Destructive Arts and earn some goodies while helping us to provide high-quality videos just by kicking us a few bucks a month. Thanks a bunch for your patronage.